It is my pleasure to bring back to the program here Blaine Conzatti, the president of the Idaho Family Policy Center. And Blaine, welcome to the program. There has been a lot of activity early on in the House State Affairs Committee when it comes to language in our statutes regarding preborn children, regarding sex and gender. We've seen the library bill that's trying to protect children from harmful materials in libraries. We see that get presented, then it's getting pulled back. I hear word that it should be making its way back, making its way around again here soon. But there's a couple of other bills too that have been popping up. I'd love to hear your opinion on, your perspective, and where we're headed. So welcome to the program. What do you how are things faring with all this early action?
Yeah, Matt. So the House State Affairs Committee is the committee that deals with all the social issues. They deal with abortion laws, with laws regulating parental rights, with laws regulating, transgender issues, sexuality issues, etc. So this is a busy committee. It's stacked full of conservatives, which is always a good thing. And there's lots of bills going through it right now.
Yeah. So let me take them a couple little one by one here. There was House Bill 400, which sought to replace the word fetus with the word preborn child, or I think it was preborn child. Yeah. So walk us through a little bit on the ramifications of this and why that's so important for our statutes to have this language. What can you tell us?
Yeah, sure. So the heartbeat bill that Idaho Family Policy Center drafted and sponsored a couple of years ago was the first time in state history where the word preborn child was added into state code. That heartbeat bill recognized that life begins at fertilization, and it referred to preborn children as preborn children. Now, there are still dozens of instances of the word fetus sprinkled throughout state code. There's a few uses of the word embryo sprinkled throughout state code. And so what Representative Julianne Young and Senator Ben Taves were trying to do with House Bill 400 is replace all those instances of fetus and embryo with the word preborn child. Now, this is a policy neutral bill. It doesn't substantively change anything in terms of state policy. Again, we already had the word preborn child in state law, and legally preborn child and fetus are synonyms. All that said, it's really important that we refer to children in the womb as preborn children. Language really does matter. It matters during court challenges as well. The court looks at the language that the legislature uses to determine intent and to determine applicability. And when we refer to children in the womb as preborn children, we humanize them. Fetus has been used to dehumanize preborn children in the womb by the secular radical left, and preborn child is far more humanizing. People understand preborn child, okay, that's a human being deserving of the same rights that you and I have.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, well, on that note, in language, you have the sex gender definition bill that's also making its way through. So, is this a similar thing where we have conflicting definitions throughout state code?
Yeah, so right now there is no definition in state code for male, for female, for father, and for mother. Those words are used often throughout state code. In fact, the word father is used 147 times. The word mother is used 133 times, 88 times for female, 44 times for male. And yet we don't have any definitions at all. And so what Representative Julianne Young and Representative Bruce Skog are doing with this bill is they are ensuring that we are using the traditional definitions for these terms, right? Mother is a biological mother of a child. Father is a biological father of a child. It also changes the definition for biological sex. There's a really good reason why they are doing that. We've had a definition of biological sex in code since 2020. But that definition of biological sex actually was tied to chromosomes. And there are disorders of intersex development where a person with XX chromosomes may have male phenotypes. And that means that they look like a male, they have male genitalia, male anatomy, even though they have female chromosomes. And so what Representative Young and Representative Skog are doing with House Bill 421 is they're ensuring, okay, biological sex is more clearly defined so that it's objectively the biological sex of the person that the language is referring to.
And how do we have stats on how rare or common folks could be born XX and still have the other gender's genitalia.
Yeah, so it's called XX male disorder, and it's 1 in 20,000 males are born with this disorder of intersex development.
Okay, so it's pretty rare.
Very rare. Yes.
Very rare. Okay. So, all right, great. So when we see these bills come through that are just simply trying to, normalize the language, if you will, and get us everybody, so we're clear exactly on what the intent of the words are when they're referred to in other parts of the statute. Why do you think there is such a huge uproar? Why do we see the left turn out in droves down in the state at the state house? I recognize fully that most of them all live down in Boise, so it's a lot easier for them to show up there. But why do you think there is so much pushback onto this? I mean, you're hearing people about like, oh, if you change the definition, then I'm erased from society. I'm it's like they disappear into the ethers or something. Like what is it about their objections, do you think?
One thing that the radical left and the neo-Marxists have understood for generations that I think conservatives have been slow to catch on to is that language really does matter. Language shapes public perception. Language, often shapes legal outcomes. And we need to have clear definitions of these terms in order to have good policy. And so when we're talking about male or female, are you referring to a biological male, or are you referring to a trans man, a biological female who identifies as a man? That often has implications for bathroom policies, for prison policies, for domestic shelter policies, etc. The same thing with preborn child, right? Is a fetus, a preborn child, fully human with the same rights that all of us have, or is the preborn child a blob of cells? And the secular left believes that, the word embryo and fetus, even if they're scientifically correct, the public perception of those words is less than human, right? And so in these ways, the language that the legislature chooses really does matter. It shapes public perception and affects legal outcomes.
Yeah. These terms that are coming up, and you see them seeping into even Supreme Court arguments. I was listening to I divulged a little personal habit of mine of listening to Supreme Court cases. I love listening to those arguments, but it seeps into that world too, where you have these solicitors and these lawyers who stand before the Supreme Court talking about terms like sex assigned at birth, as if your sex or your gender is assigned to you at birth because a doctor said, "Oh, look, I see this, I see that. You are a girl," and then they got it wrong. That kind of language to me is Orwellian, and it's extremely disturbing. And people just they walk past it and allow it to happen. What is the danger? I mean, how dangerous is that for us to just go down that path?
It's incredibly dangerous. We cannot cede the battle of language. As conservatives, as Christians, language really matters. God spoke creation into existence with words, and then he commanded Adam and Eve to name the animals. Language is part of God's good design, and it needs to reflect God's order and God's creation and God's intent behind everything.
Yeah, well put. Okay. Let's take a short break. I want to get back into some of these other bills and hear what you're working on. So we'll be back real quickly.